Hi everyone, welcome to today's Facebook Live. We are talking about reducing PMS, mood, cravings, and cramps. I am right now on day 8 of a 10-day detox with the Brio Group detox. It's been interesting to sort of see how I function without some of the staple foods in there. So this detox involves reducing and taking out gradually some of the inflammatory foods. And I've noticed it's so interesting to kind of notice how often we think about snacking and eating, even when you're not hungry. And I noticed that I've, of course, removed a lot of the snack foods and things that we can't have on the detox from visible sight. But even just sitting on a certain area of the couch, I notice I'll think about certain snacks or certain weekend activities are kind of linked to certain snacks as well. So it's amazing those neural pathways that are ingrained in there. But it's been great just removing some of those staples like grains for a few days, and it's helping me to learn how to get creative with cooking and learn how to cook a lot more fish, which is really nice. I've always wanted to learn how to cook more fish, and I'm definitely going to be making some poke bowls from home this summer. So that's been great. So if we haven't met before, my name is Dr. Carin. I'm a naturopathic physician and a registered acupuncturist at Brio. And today we're going to be learning some tips for reducing PMS from a Chinese medicine point of view, and some specific recommendations if you have mood and cravings as being a particular concern for you, or pain and fluid retention being particularly bad. Also, if you have menstrual cramps, this is technically not PMS, but it is something that can be debilitating and can come up quite often. So I will give you a few tips for menstrual cramps as well at the end. So I wanted to talk about PMS because I've always been fascinated with the cycle. There's this monthly phenomenon that happens without us making it happen. To me, that's that reflection of our connection with nature, as well as that intelligence that we have built in. But as inspiring as it is, our cycles can be uncomfortable. Some people would say annoying, but also somewhat downright painful. Over 80% of women with cycles have premenstrual symptoms. Most of the time mild, but sometimes this can be severe and persistent and can really affect our daily life. So unfortunately, to make matters worse, in our culture, we have this tendency to also pressure us to hide what we're going through with our cycles, and almost like the cycle doesn't even exist. So this kind of tendency makes us hesitate to share anything about our struggles with coworkers or employers or teachers, and that pressure to pretend that everything is fine from a Chinese medicine point of view might even be contributing to some of that PMS. So I wanted to share a few tips about how to reduce PMS symptoms with diet and lifestyle, and also, of course, just help to encourage that discussion around the cycles and PMS as well. PMS is premenstrual syndrome. So these are our physical symptoms and mood changes that are cyclical, monthly. They tend to occur on the second half of the cycle. So typically 1 to 2 weeks right before the period. And they can end at the onset of the period or by the end of the period. So some of these mood changes could be anxiety, irritability, aggression, depression, even difficulty concentrating or having really strong cravings, and sleep issues as well. Now, some of the physical symptoms can include low back pain, other body pain, swelling, breast tenderness or pain, headaches, or just a feeling of being kind of puffy right before your period. Thumbs up if any of these symptoms sound familiar to you. If you have other symptoms, please write them in the comments. But diet and lifestyle can be really helpful for these symptoms. So again, we'll talk about reducing PMS with Chinese medicine, as well as tips specifically for reducing mood and cravings, and tips for reducing pain and fluid retention. And then as a bonus at the end, we'll talk a little bit about my favorite tips for menstrual cramps as well. So reducing PMS with Chinese medicine. In traditional Chinese medicine, the liver is responsible for the smooth flow of energy in the body. And PMS arises from the stagnation of that liver energy. We call this liver Qi stagnation. Have you ever noticed you have a tendency to sigh randomly throughout the day? This could be liver Qi stagnation, and this is for men or women, can be a sign that there's some obstruction or stagnation of that liver energy. When this flow becomes stagnant, you can turn into a greater tendency to anger, irritability, constipation, and for cycling women, PMS, and even irregular periods as well. So liver Qi stagnates just from our daily life, basically suppressing that free-flowing, authentic expression of emotions or thoughts. So this could be by maybe going along with things even if it doesn't feel right to you, or not making enough space or time in your day to allow your thoughts and feelings to come up and also to be expressed. So to improve liver Qi, we want to be looking for ways to improve the flow of thoughts and emotions. So this could be from making art or making music, journaling, daydreaming, dancing. Breath can be really, really helpful for this as well. As you can tell, when your body is sighing, it's trying to move that Qi, trying to move that liver Qi. So doing things like acupuncture, which some of my patients have told me, they feel like they can breathe deeper after an acupuncture treatment. You can do this as well with just watching a funny movie and laughing really hard, or even a sad movie and crying. Talking to a friend can be great for this too. Just deep breathing or doing breathing exercises. Walking or running type of exercise, just because it moves your breath, and even just smelling flowers and inhaling can be really nice to move that liver Qi. Now, there's been a few studies that actually confirm this, that aerobic exercise is more beneficial than strength training for PMS. And I think part of that has to do with moving that breath from a Chinese medicine point of view. So with exercise and PMS, frequency is more important than how long you're doing the exercise for or how intense that exercise is. So aim for doing some kind of movement every day, 5 to 7 days a week. If you don't do any particular exercise now, maybe a 10-minute walk every day would be a good place to start. And of course, while you're walking around your neighborhood, notice the flowers, smell the flowers. Just to give you an idea of what we're shooting for in Chinese medicine, the formula that we use for liver Qi stagnation is called free and easy wander. And that kind of gives you the essence of what we're going for with all our activities as well. We want to allow our thoughts and our body to wander. So try to walk or exercise or do art with that in mind. All right, so that was reducing PMS with Chinese medicine, so trying to get that liver Qi flow improved. Now, second is reducing mood and cravings. And I've got 3 tips for this particular issue. Now, on top of moving your liver Qi, just with what the activities we talked about a moment ago, I would add in a few other things, a few other considerations when we're talking about mood and cravings. So one of the things that those of us who get that tendency to get hangry when we miss a meal, we know that the impact of blood sugar can be big when it comes to mood. So starting off with just making sure that we get lots of complex carbohydrates. So these are the carbohydrates that have lots of fiber in them. So it could be something as simple as just having more of those non-starchy foods in a meal. Aim to have about half of your plate being those vegetables like leafy greens or broccoli. Or it could be switching out things like whole grains instead of refined grain products. We can also do things that I like to do, like mixing some of your starchy bases like pasta with zucchini noodles, or some cutting green beans to the same shape and size as penne pasta and mixing that up. So there's less of the starch and more fiber in that starchy base. You can also just wilt some spinach or other leafy greens with your spaghetti to increase the amount of fiber in there. Secondly, glutamine. Glutamine can be a lifesaver for those of us who have sugar cravings. Particularly, this can be really strong before a period. So glutamine is something that I've actually talked about before for gut health. Glutamine is an amino acid that's used to repair our gut lining. But it can actually really calm down sugar cravings as well. Glutamine-rich foods are things like cabbage, parsley, organ meats, and bone broth as well. So this one is a nice one because you get both the digestive benefits as well as just calming down sugar and carb cravings. Third one, when it comes to mood and cravings, is eating foods that are really good for brain health. Now, whenever we talk about hormones, cycles, PMS, we often talk about hormone imbalances. Maybe you've heard about estrogen dominance or progesterone deficiencies. And certainly these are fairly common patterns that we see. But one of the things that I notice sometimes is missing when we're assessing PMS is that a lot of times PMS can occur even without those hormone imbalances. And what's happening there is there's the normal hormone cycles, the ups and downs of the hormones, but that actually affects some of our neurotransmitters, so some of our brain chemistry. So you may have heard of things like serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. Those can really affect our moods, and they can change according to the changes in our hormones. So instead of really focusing on the hormone part, we definitely want to make sure our diet supports our brain chemistry, so the neurotransmitters. So in this case, serotonin is particularly important one if there's cravings involved, and also anxiety or depression. So for this, you can look at tryptophan-rich foods. Maybe you've heard of tryptophan coming from turkey, which is a good one, but there's also chicken. You can get tryptophan from fish, lentils, eggs, and I'll have this list written on the summary of this video as well, with a couple other options for tryptophan-rich foods. So nuts and seeds are another one as well. The other one you want to be looking at, other nutrient to look at, is vitamin B6. And vitamin B6 can be depleted by stress as well. But vitamin B6 is really important for making serotonin and GABA and other neurotransmitters. So this is one that's important to get into our diet also. I've got a list here. I'll be writing that down as well. But vitamin B6 foods are like salmon, chicken again, sweet potatoes, and avocados, some of my favorite things. So for brain health and improving serotonin levels, tryptophan-rich foods and vitamin B6 are a really good one to look at. So just to summarize that, the point here for mood improving and for improving and calming down carbs and sugar cravings, making sure to eat lots of complex carbohydrates, so lots of fiber with your starches. Eat glutamine-rich foods like cabbage and bone broth, and then eating foods that are really good for brain health, so tryptophan-rich foods and vitamin B6. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about what foods to eat for reducing pain and fluid retention before your period. So this is a really common one. Some people just feel pain sort of all over. Sometimes it's just low back pain. Some people just say it just feel puffy and swollen. Maybe it's breast tenderness for you. Some of this pain, of course, can start before your period and then extend on to menstrual cramps as well. What's really important with these symptoms is looking at inflammation levels in the body. We know that these type of PMS symptoms are linked to greater levels of what's called prostaglandins, which are these powerful messengers of inflammation. And there appears to be more higher levels of prostaglandins in the uterus when we have these kinds of PMS symptoms. So thankfully, we can actually use diet to help to manage this kind of inflammation. So eating an anti-inflammatory diet with specifically these types of foods can be helpful. So choosing things like fish, legumes, nuts, seeds, and vegetables over red meat and dairy can be a really quick and helpful way of reducing inflammation in the body. Now, even if we want to reduce the dairy levels, we definitely want to make sure that we're still having plenty of calcium. Calcium is really important for actually improving PMS symptoms, so reducing things like cravings as well. But we want to try to get that calcium in without dairy. So some of the dairy-free calcium examples are things like dark green leafy vegetables. Sesame seeds are one of my favorites. A lot of seeds have lots of calcium in them. Sardines and other canned fish can be a good option for this too, because you can just eat the bones. Other things like tofu, soybeans is helpful for this too. It appears that right before the period, our calcium levels go down a little bit, so that's why having some calcium can be helpful. And having it with non-dairy sources will likely be helpful because sometimes dairy can block the absorption of magnesium, which is another nutrient that's really important for brain health as well as just muscle health. Lastly, in terms of an anti-inflammatory foods is essential fatty acids. And I've already mentioned many of these because they're anti-inflammatory foods, but oils coming from things like fish, olive oil, and flax. The flax seed itself or the oil can be really helpful for reducing inflammation. Second, for fluid retention. So there are certain foods like alcohol, caffeine, and just having excess salt that can hold on to excess fluid. So trying to reduce that and seeing if that can help would be worth a try. I had a patient who just cut out coffee for a couple months, and that made a huge difference to breast tenderness, almost completely resolving it. So these kinds of things can, depending on how you process caffeine and how much coffee you're having and things like that, can make a huge impact as well. And many of these things help because they're helping the liver function better. And of course, the liver helps to clear hormones as well as manage excess inflammation by clearing chemical toxins, but also metabolic waste out of the body too. So I know I'm running a little bit over time here, but I wanted to make sure that I covered one last bit here on reducing menstrual cramps. And I know menstrual cramps can be really tricky and debilitating part of our periods. And so if this is an issue for you, I highly recommend looking and reviewing that the anti-inflammatory foods that we just mentioned, because those prostaglandin levels, those inflammatory messengers, they're definitely connected with the menstrual cramp which is very similar to that pain and fluid retention we were talking about. So any way that we can reduce inflammation would be really helpful for menstrual cramps. So these are things like choosing more fish and legumes over red meat and dairy, for example. So definitely look over that section with anti-inflammatory foods if menstrual cramps are issues for you. Also, with menstrual cramps, remember that it's the uterine muscle that's contracting. And so doing things that are helpful for muscle health is really beneficial. So that could be making sure you're getting lots of magnesium in. That could be through your food or through a supplement, or even a topical magnesium you can put on your skin will be absorbed, even through an Epsom salt bath. That can be really helpful, as well as just putting on heat, making sure your body is warm. Even eating warm foods can be helpful for reducing muscle tension. Stretching exercises can be great for this as well. Back to warm foods. So this could be temperature of foods. That can be really helpful and comforting, but also even warming herbs. So cinnamon, things like that you can add into your foods. My favorite herb for menstrual cramps is ginger. So you can do this, as a dried ginger in your food or fresh ginger in your food, or you can do dried ginger capsules as well. We know that ginger is anti-inflammatory, so this can be really helpful with just calming down the intensity of menstrual cramps. So, and of course, talk to your practitioner before starting any new supplements or medications. But let me give you a little bit of summary of just what we talked about. So reducing PMS with Chinese medicine by moving your liver qi. That's using emotional expression, using your breath, and then letting your mind and body wander. Second, tips for reducing mood and craving issues. We talked about making sure we have lots of high fiber carbs. And then glutamine-rich foods, things like cabbage and bone broth that can help to not only heal your gut, but to reduce the sugar and carb cravings. And then brain health foods, so foods that have lots of tryptophan and vitamin B6. And then number 3, tips for reducing pain and fluid retention. So that would be body pain, breast tenderness, eating lots of anti-inflammatory foods, which I have a whole list that written down here so you can review that. But things like fish over red meat, legumes, and nuts and seeds over dairy. It's a great place to start. But still trying to get lots of calcium from non-dairy sources can be super helpful. And then see if avoiding alcohol, caffeine sources, and excess salt is helpful for you in terms of fluid retention, because that can be a really quick and powerful intervention as well. And then lastly, we talked just a little bit about menstrual cramps and how inflammation is really an important part of that. And of course, anti-inflammatory foods are helpful for that, but also warming herbs like cinnamon and ginger. And then doing things like magnesium and heat for improving muscle health is great for that as well. If you have any questions about hormones, PMS, maybe there's other issues that I didn't mention around periods, please let me know in the comments, and I'll definitely try to address that next time. I know that PMS symptoms, as you can tell, are a really complex interaction between hormones, as well as brain chemistry and inflammation. So trying to think about those 3 major areas can really help us to improve and reduce those symptoms. Oftentimes these symptoms essentially reveal an underlying chronic imbalance, and those can be coming from stress, diet, medications, and other lifestyle factors. But that also means that stress and stress management and dietary modifications can be really helpful for this. So I hope that there were 1 or 2 things today that can help make your cycles a little bit smoother. If you know of anyone who you think could benefit from this information, please share this video, and we would be happy to help them. And of course, let me know if you have any other topics that you'd like to hear about. I'd be happy to address them. Thanks for joining me today, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.